Welcome back to the KOAM Morning News. We have Lori Horton with us this morning to teach us how to make some fruit cocktail cake. Good morning to you. Thank you for being with us.
Monday again, right? Oof. This one is really a classic one, so I have to start this morning by asking you, are you a fan of Steel Magnolias movie?
You know what, my mom is, and so I've seen it, but I was really young. So.
Yeah, it sort of gives us a certain age to go by, right? There's a classic scene in the movie when all the ladies are in the hair salon and they're talking about their favorite desserts.
Yes.
Super simple. And this is that dessert. So it's a great one.
Yes.
It's a good time of year for it. Super easy, not a lot of prep time. A little bit of time in the oven, but luckily today it's a little bit cooler, so we're good with that.
Perfect.
So it starts with 3 very simple ingredients, and you can elaborate on this. We're going to make it a little bit fancier today, but you can start super simple with just those 3. And it is literally a cup of flour, a cup of sugar, and a cup of fruit cocktail.
How about that? Easy.
That alone will do it.
Easy.
We want to start though with sifting that flour, and I'm going to just go a little bit slowly here and get that nice, and all that does is make it a little bit silkier. You don't have to be perfect with that, but it just gets those major lumps out of the flour. You can do this with a hand sifter. If you'd use a little bit bigger mixer, you don't have to do it, but we're going to mix by hand. So we'll make sure make sure we get all those little chunks out of there. So once we get that run through, we're going to add that cup of sugar. The cup of fruit cocktail is actually straight out of the can. We want to make sure and leave the juice in it because that's really the only liquid that we're going to add to this recipe today. But since I'm going to add a few extras, I'm actually going to go ahead and use the whole can. So this is going to be just a little bit more than a cup.
That's okay. More fruit,
more syrup, more sugar. Let's just say this is definitely not a healthy recipe in any way, shape, or form. Let me go ahead and dump my cup of sugar on top of that. It'll mix a little bit easier. And we're just going to pour that whole thing in. Now, you can use whatever kind you like. If you want to do, the extra cherries, if you want to do the whole fruit. I think it does bake up a little richer if you go ahead and use the heavy syrup. Again, not health food, but if you go with the lighter versions or the fruit juice, it's just not quite as nice. So a little bit of a personal preference for me is a dash of salt. We're going to be real precise in our measurement here. Do this grandma's way. And we want to add at the end just a little splash of vanilla. And this is about a teaspoon of a nice rich dark vanilla. Don't cheap out on this one because it really does. You taste that flavor more the fewer ingredients you have. So really go for the good ones when you have a simpler recipe. And aside from that, we're just going to make sure that those are really thoroughly mixed and get all of those dry ingredients incorporated. It's going to be a nice, soft, sort of a, really juicy batter here for this cake. And then my additions to it, because again, personal preference, and the reason I went ahead and added all of that fruit and juice is I'm going to add a little bit of coconut and a few pecans to that. So it goes really well with the fruit. Gives it a little bit of a crunch when we're done. So that little extra liquid is going to compensate with that. And then we're going to throw this in an 8x8 pan and bake it at 350 for about 40 to 45 minutes.
All righty, sounds like a plan. Well, thanks, Lori. Stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We've got Lori Horton with us this morning, and she's showing us how to make a fruit cocktail cake. Now we've made our cake batter.
We've got our cake batter ready. That was super simple. It was just the full can of fruit cocktail with a cup of flour that we sifted and that cup of sugar. Added a little dash of salt to, believe it or not, kind of cut a little bit of that super sweetness to it. A little bit. And we added a little bit of pecans and some sweetened coconut. So that just, kind of took it up that extra notch. You know how I do. Now, if your expert baker this morning had brought an extra cake pan, we would pour this batter into an 8x8 cake pan that we sprayed generously with some baking spray or, take some butter and coat that. You don't need to flour it, you just want to grease it. Just kind of makes that release a little bit easier because this is a sticky, gooey cake. So once we have that all mixed up, and you'll see it's a really nice, thick, but still it's got a lot of fruit and that juice in it batter. It's not going to rise a whole lot, so don't worry about the size of your pan. that's pretty much where the batter goes.
Oh, perfect.
That's where it stays. Baked it at 350 for about 40 to 45 minutes. It's going to come out nice and golden around those edges.
Yes.
So that's the most important thing to watch for. This is not a cake you can take your toothpick and test it to come out clean. It's not going to work.
Okay, yes.
So it's going to stay really gooey and kind of thick
So
in the
you're just
middle.
gonna look for those edges to
Look
make sure
for
that
those
it's
edges, and then
Okay.
you'll really see after it comes out for just a couple minutes, it separates nicely, kind of shrinks in a little bit on the pan as it cools. So you can serve it just like that. It's absolutely delicious, warm out of the oven. Just let it set for 5 or 10 minutes. You know, maybe put that scoop of ice cream with it, something like that. But as we usually do, we're gonna have to take it up
Yes.
like one more notch. So we're gonna make some homemade whipped cream
Okay.
to put on the
Oh,
top.
yum.
Okay. This is also really, really simple. Not a lot of ingredients and just a couple minutes of time of whipping up this whipped cream. Now you can use heavy whipped cream or actually just cream, heavy cream, and that actually has a little bit higher fat content and it holds up a little bit longer. So if you're going to be serving this right away and all you have is the heavy whipping cream, perfectly fine.
Does either one take longer to whip up, or is it just
No,
about the same?
it's actually about the same. It's really kind of more about how long it holds.
Right,
So the
okay.
whipping cream will kind of start to lose its air over time a little bit faster than the heavy cream
okay.
because it's just got a little bit less fat in it. So we're going to start with about a cup of that. We want to make sure it's nice and cold right out of the fridge. And you can actually make this with powdered sugar or granulated sugar, and you'll see recipes with both. And I think it's generally comes down to personal preference, or maybe sometimes what you have on hand, because I
Yes.
don't notice a huge difference at the end of the day
Oh, really?
as far as taste
Okay.
with either one.
Because I would think that maybe one would be like more like leaning on a frosting, or like one would be even
Right.
a meringue or something like
It
that.
it
leaning-
really doesn't make a huge difference,
Okay.
and you'd think it'd maybe have a little grittier texture to a smoother texture with the powdered sugar. Really is not a huge difference. That granulated sugar dissolves nicely as
Okay.
you whip it up, so it doesn't really make a big difference there, and the sweetness factor on it is really about the same. So I'm just adding to this about a half of a cup of powdered sugar. And then just to give it a little bit of some type of a flavor besides just that sugar, we're going to come back again with our really good vanilla and add about a teaspoon. And then when we come back, we'll start to whip that up and
All
serve
right.
it.
Sounds like a plan. Stick around. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back. And Lori is just showing us the last few steps to her cocktail cake. So what's left?
So what's left is just making a really nice creamy topping to go with that. So again, this is a really rich, very sweet dessert. So it is really good, warm, fresh out of that oven. But if you go ahead and let it cool,
Oh, yeah.
you can add some homemade whipped cream to the top. So all I've done while we were in our quick break was I started a little bit with whipping up our heavy whipping
Yes.
cream, a little powdered sugar and vanilla. So it's still pretty liquid. This has just had a few seconds on the mixer. So I'm going to go ahead and make a little bit of noise here. It doesn't take very long to go ahead and thicken this up. What we want to get to is a stiff peaks form. So it takes about a minute to a
Okay.
minute and a half.
Yeah.
And a good hand mixer, this is not something you have to get out all the big equipment
Right,
for or
yes.
anything like that. It's going to come together pretty quickly. So we'll make just a few more seconds here. You can already see just in that few extra ones, it's starting to really kind of form and stiffen up for us. You want to make sure you stop about halfway through and scrape your bowl a little bit. Get all of those dry little bits of, whether it's granulated or powdered sugar, either way. Get those edges really mixed in. And don't overbeat it because you actually can curdle the whipping
Yes.
cream. So you want to go about so far. And when you have those nice stiff peaks that form off of your beaters, it's
Oh,
really hard to
so
see
good,
that
yes.
bright white under the studio lights, I know. But you'll get those nice stiff peaks start to form pretty quickly. We're going to set that down so we don't make too much of a mess. And it comes together. So at that point, you are really set to make some nice little scoops. You can either take this into some little parfait cups.
Oh, yeah.
The nice part by adding those couple extra ingredients and the rest of that can of fruit cocktail is this bakes up a little more solid than when you just do the cup of cocktail,
Oh,
the
okay.
cup of flour, and the
Yes.
cup of sugar. So it holds together a little bit nicer, makes it a little bit easier to serve, quite honestly. If you do just the cup, you'll want to maybe serve it in a little bowl with a spoon.
Yeah.
Whereas this, you can see it's a nice sturdy, and just a good little dollop of that whipped cream on the side. You can come back with this and actually, you know, top your whole cake with it. If you want to get very fancy when you come to serve it, you can spread this all over the top, maybe add some toasted coconut and extra pecans on there. Again, it's good to have that little bit of crunch with
cherries
it.
even too.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
some extra
Have some
cherry
fun with
pieces
it.
on top. Exactly, just whatever is your favorite part of it, add those extra bits to it. So if you want to have a quick little sample of that, I'm telling you, it's breakfast that will keep you going all morning long. But again, it's as simple as you want it to be with just those 3 ingredients, or you can really kind of bring it up to that next level. It's perfect for an outdoor or something because it doesn't have to stay refrigerated.
Yes.
You can serve it without that whipped cream, and it's easy to go.
You're going to want the whipped cream, by the way. That's
You really do.
delicious.
It's so good with it.
I could just
It's a
give me
perfect
spoon and I'll
combination.
take care of that for you, Lori.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you again, as always, for being with us this morning and sharing another delicious recipe. Of course, I have this recipe on our website, KOAMNewsNow.com. Later on this morning, I'm dealing with the whipped cream right
so
now.
sorry.
Stick around. We'll be right back.